The walk to the royal wing of the palace felt longer than the entire journey from the human colonies to the Varel capital. Rian followed Princess Leora through corridors lined with glowing crystal panels, each step echoed against polished floors. Alien servants stopped to bow as she passed, their eyes flicking to him in open curiosity. He had no idea where they were going. The paper in his hand felt heavier than it should, as though the words chosen protector carried a weight he wasn't ready for. Finally, they stopped before a tall arched doorway. Two Varel guards stood on either side, their armor faintly humming. They stepped aside at the princess's approach. Inside was a chamber unlike anything Rian had seen. Soft blue light drifted from floating orbs, and the air was warmer, scented faintly with something like flowers and sea air. Cushions and strange furniture shaped like flowing waves filled the room. Leora moved to a long table where a tray of drinks waited. She poured one into a crystal cup and gestured for Rian to sit. "You look as if you're still trying to understand what happened," she said. "That's because I am." Rian replied honestly. "One moment I'm standing in the back, and the next I'm whatever this is." Her lips curved faintly. "Protector." "Right," he said, taking the seat across from her. "What does that actually mean?" Leora set down her cup. "Every generation, the royal heir chooses one individual to stand at their side. Someone who will guard them, yes, but also represent them in certain matters. It is not simply about fighting. It is about trust, judgment, and presence." "Presence?" Rian echoed. "The one chosen is expected to be near the heir at most times, in the council chambers, during travel, even at ceremonial gatherings. Many see it as a sign of who the heir values most." Rian frowned. "That sounds like a job for someone experienced in your customs, someone who knows your politics." "I did not want someone from my world," Leora said simply. "I wanted someone who could think differently, someone who could see what others miss." "Out of all the people in the hall, you decided that was me, yes?" There was no hesitation in her answer, and it made Rian shift uncomfortably. "But I'm not. You are not like the others," she interrupted. "That is the point." Before Rian could think of a reply, the door opened. A tall figure entered, an older Varel with a staff of polished stone. His robes were marked with golden symbols. "Princess," he said, bowing, "shall I explain the oath to your new protector?" "Yes, Elder Marin." Leora replied. The elder turned to Rian. His voice was calm, but his eyes held a weight that made Rian straighten. "The chosen protector swears to defend the heir with their life, to speak for them when given leave, and to keep their secrets as their own in return. The heir swears to trust the protector's counsel, to safeguard their well-being, and to treat them as an equal in private matters." Rian blinked. "Equal? I thought this was about guarding her. A quality is rare among the Varel," Marin said. "It is part of why this role carries such importance." The elder produced a thin band of metal shaped to fit a wrist. "Place your hand here." Rian hesitated but obeyed. The metal warmed at his touch, tightening slightly around his wrist until it fit perfectly. Faint lines of light appeared along its surface. "This mark," Marin said, "shows all who see it that you are bound to the princess's protection. It cannot be removed without her command." Rian looked at the glowing band. "So I'm officially part of this now." "You are," Leora said. Her gaze was steady from this moment. "Your place is beside me." The elder bowed and left, leaving them in quiet. Rian leaned back slightly. "And what happens if I fail?" "You do not fail," she said. "If you doubt yourself, you think harder, act faster, or find another way. That is why I chose you, because humans do not give up easily." Rian didn't know whether to feel honored or pressured. "All right, so what happens now?" "Now," she said, standing, "you learn how to live in the palace without offending every noble who sees you." The rest of the day was a blur of introductions. Leora led Rian through halls where paintings shifted as you walked past, to courtyards with pools of shimmering liquid that reflected not the sky above, but other places entirely. Every corner of the palace seemed alive, as if the walls themselves listened. He met members of the royal council, each one with a different reaction. Some greeted him politely, though their eyes betrayed doubt. Others barely hid their disapproval. speaking to Leora as though Rian wasn't even there. One counselor, a broad-shouldered Varel named Torvin, gave Rian a long, measuring look. A human protector. That will be discussed. It is already decided, Leora said without pause. And my decisions are not up for debate. Torvin inclined his head slightly. Though his expression didn't soften, Rian could tell the man wasn't pleased. Later, as they walked through one of the quieter gardens, Rian asked, "Do all of them dislike me already?" "Some will," Leora admitted. "Not because of who you are, but because you are not one of them. The Varel have long believed their ways are the only ways worth following. That's going to make my job harder." "It will," she agreed, "but it will also make it more important." They reached a small balcony overlooking the city. From here, Rian could see the spires of the palace stretching high above shimmering rooftops, and beyond that, the silver curve of the horizon. "This is a place of beauty," Leora said quietly, "but also of danger. Power draws envy. Decisions draw enemies. The one who stands beside me must be ready for both." Rian looked out over the city. Somewhere far below, the human delegation was probably still discussing what had happened. His life had changed in a single sentence spoken by someone he had never met before today. He glanced at the glowing band on his wrist. "I hope you're right about me." Leora's expression softened, just slightly. "I do not hope," she said. "I choose." He didn't. The hall of the Varel Palace was the largest room he had ever seen. Tall crystal walls that caught the sunlight, floors so smooth they reflected the faces of the guards, and strange glowing plants hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of spice and something like rain after a storm. Rian was just a young soldier from the human colonies, chosen to be part of a peace delegation. His job was simple: stand, keep quiet, and don't embarrass anyone. The human representatives were there to strengthen ties with the Varel Empire. After years of tense contact, around him stood Varel guards, tall, lean beings with metallic blue skin and eyes like polished glass. Their armor shone like liquid silver. Rian's own uniform looked plain next to them, and he felt the difference in every glance they gave him. A horn sounded, deep and powerful, echoing through the hall. The Varel king and queen entered through the great doors, their long robes trailing like rivers of light. Behind them walked their daughter, Princess Leora. She was unlike the other Varel nobles. While most wore heavy, jeweled headdresses, Leora's hair was loose, falling in waves of pale silver. Her eyes were bright, almost glowing, and she moved with calm confidence, not the stiff formality of others. The human delegation bowed, and Rian followed their lead. He kept his head low, staring at the polished floor, thinking only of blending. And the royal family reached the dais, a raised platform decorated with symbols carved in glass. The king greeted the human envoy with formal words, his voice smooth but carrying weight. The queen smiled politely, though Rian noticed her gaze was sharp, as if she measured every person in the room. Then it happened. As the speeches continued, Leora's attention drifted. Her eyes began to search the hall, moving over the alien guards and human soldiers alike. When her gaze reached the back row, it stopped. On him, Rian felt her stare, sharp and focused. He shifted his weight uncomfortably, glancing behind to see if perhaps she was looking at someone else. But there was no one behind him. Leora's lips curved in the smallest hint of a smile. She turned to her parents and spoke clearly, her voice ringing across the silent hall. "I want him." Every sound in the hall died instantly. The king turned his head slightly toward his daughter, one eyebrow lifting. The queen's eyes narrowed in interest. The human delegation froze. The Varel nobles began whispering behind raised hands. Rian's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. She couldn't possibly mean the king's deep voice broke the silence. "You have chosen." "I have chosen," Leora replied without hesitation. Her gaze never left Rian. The queen's smile returned, softer this time. "Then bring him forward." Two Varel guards stepped toward Rian. He instinctively straightened, his mind racing. What was going on? Was this some kind of mistake? Was he in trouble? The guards stopped in front of him and gestured toward the dais. "Come," one said in accented standard. Rian walked forward slowly, feeling the eyes of every person in the hall on him. His boots clicked against the floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat in his ears. When he reached the base of the dais, he looked up at the princess. She stood a little taller than him, her presence strangely commanding despite her calm expression. "Do you know," the king asked, "what it means to be chosen by the princess on the day of choosing?" Rian shook his head, still too stunned to find words. The queen spoke instead. "It is an old tradition. Once each cycle, our daughter may select one to stand at her side, a protector and companion in all matters until the choosing ends. It is a role of great honor and great burden." Rian finally found his voice. "Your Majesty, I am only a soldier. Surely there are others more trained." The queen's smile deepened. "Perhaps, but the choice is not ours to question." Leora stepped closer, her silver eyes locking on his. "I want you," she repeated. Her tone was calm but carried certainty, like a decision made long ago. A ripple of confusion moved through the human delegation. One of Rian's senior officers looked like he wanted to speak but thought better of it. The king studied his daughter for a long moment. "You are certain?" "Yes, father." The king gave a single nod. "Then it is decided. You will serve." At her side, Rian's mind was a storm of questions. Why him? Why a human? And what exactly did this role involve? He could feel the unspoken questions in the room, the weight of disapproval from the nobles who clearly did not understand or accept the princess's choice. The queen dismissed the gathering with a wave, and the hall began to empty. As the murmurs and whispers followed him, Rian remained standing near the dais, unsure whether to bow, salute, or simply stand still. Leora descended the steps toward him. Up close, she was even more striking, not in a way that made him nervous, but in a way that made it impossible to look away. "You seem surprised," she said. "That would be one word for it," Rian replied cautiously. Her smile was faint but genuine. "Good. I prefer those who are honest." Before he could ask anything, a Varel guard approached and handed him a set of orders, written in both standard and the flowing script of the Varel language. It stated plainly, "Rian of the human colonies is hereby appointed as chosen protector to Princess Leora of the Varel Empire, effective immediately." Rian looked from the paper to the princess. "This is really happening." "It is," she said simply. Then, as if the matter were settled, she turned and walked toward the royal wing of the palace. Over her shoulder, she added, "Follow me, protector." Rian hesitated only a moment before stepping after her, the echo of her words still in his mind, "protector." He didn't yet know what dangers awaited him in the days ahead, but he knew one thing. Whatever had just begun was far bigger than a peace delegation, and for reasons he couldn't yet understand, it had begun with her choosing him. The first sound Rian heard was the soft hum of the wall panels. As they shifted from a dim blue night glow to warm gold daylight, the air changed, too, carrying the scent of fresh fruit and flowers. Somewhere far away, he could hear a deep chime. That marked the start of the royal day. He had been given a room close to Princess Leora's chambers, far larger than anything he had ever stayed in before. The bed seemed to mold perfectly to his shape. The walls displayed changing images of landscapes from across the empire, and a small, floating globe of light followed him when he moved. But even with all the comfort, Rian felt uneasy. He wasn't here as a guest, he was here as a protector. And this was a world where most people didn't think humans belonged. A soft chime at his door made him turn. A young Varel attendant stepped inside, holding folded clothing, a long coat-like garment with silver thread and a light chest plate of strange metal. "This is for the chosen protector," the attendant said. Rian took it, turning the armor. Piece in his hands, it was much lighter than it looked. "Do I wear this all the time?" "When you are with the princess, yes," the attendant replied. "It marks your role." Rian changed quickly and followed the attendant to the princess's audience room. Leora was already there, standing by an open window that looked out over the gardens. She was speaking with two scribes who took notes on glowing tablets. When she noticed him, she dismissed the scribes with a wave. "You move quietly for someone in armor," she said. "Lightweight," Rian replied. Not what I'm used to. Good. You will need to move fast sometimes. The day was filled with tasks Rian hadn't expected. He followed Leora through meetings with merchants who brought rare goods from distant planets. He stood behind her during council discussions about trade, routes, and border patrols. He even accompanied her to the Hall of Learning, where children of noble houses studied history and politics. At first, he felt useless, just standing there, not speaking. But after a while, he began to notice things. During a meeting with a high-ranking noble, Rian saw how the man's gaze kept shifting toward a scribe in the corner, as if silently passing signals. During a council session, he caught two officials whispering while others spoke, their words carefully hidden behind polite smiles. The palace was beautiful, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Everyone seemed to be watching each other, measuring every word. That afternoon, Leora led him to the gardens for a short break. The air outside was fresh, filled with the sound of small, winged creatures singing from the crystal trees. "Do you notice anything?" she asked, sitting on a low stone bench. Rian glanced around. There are a lot of eyes in the palace. Too many people paying attention to who talks to who. Her lips curved slightly. "You are beginning to see it." "See what?" "That. Not everyone here wishes the same for the future. My father's rule is strong, but change always brings those who prefer chaos." Rian nodded slowly. "So I'm not just guarding you from blades or blasters." "No," she said. "You are guarding me from the shadows as well." Later that evening, they attended a small reception in one of the palace halls. The room glowed with soft green light, and tables were covered with shimmering dishes of food. Varel nobles moved gracefully, speaking in low tones. Rian stood just behind Leora, scanning the crowd. He saw several nobles glance his way and then quickly look elsewhere. One of them, a tall, thin man with dark markings along his face, approached. He bowed slightly to Leora, but ignored Rian entirely. "Your Highness," the man said smoothly, "I trust your new appointment is satisfactory." "It is," Leora replied, her tone polite but cool. The man's eyes flicked briefly to Rian. "Unusual choice. Some may see it as risky. Some," Leora said, "have no place questioning my choices." The noble smiled faintly and stepped away. Rian leaned closer and spoke quietly. "Friend of yours?" "Not in the way you mean," she said. The palace gardens were at their most beautiful in the evening. The crystal leaves caught the light from the floating lanterns, scattering colors across the pathways. Small winged creatures darted between the flowers, their hum mixing with the sound of soft music from somewhere deeper in the palace. It was the night of the moon blossom ceremony, a peaceful event where the royal family walked the gardens under the pale light of the twin moons. Nobles and guests moved slowly along the winding paths, speaking in low, respectful voices. Rian walked the steps behind Princess Leora, scanning the crowd the way he had been taught. He noticed where the guards were posted, which guests were close, and which ones kept their distance. His eyes were always moving, never resting in one place for long. Leora wore a long silver cloak that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. She moved with calm grace, occasionally greeting nobles they passed. Rian kept his replies short and polite when spoken to, but his focus stayed on the edges of the gathering, where danger often hid. They reached the moon blossom tree, the centerpiece of the ceremony. Its petals glowed softly, releasing a faint mist that drifted into the air like silver smoke. The guests formed a half circle as the king and queen stepped forward to place crystal lanterns. At the base of the tree, the crowd grew quiet. That was when Rian saw movement. At first, it was only a shadow at the far end of the garden, half hidden by the curve of the path. Then he noticed it again, a flicker of motion. Quick and low. His hand tightened round the hilt of his short blade. The music continued, the crowd unaware. The shadow moved closer, slipping between the glow of the lanterns. Rian saw a second figure now, both wearing dark, close-fitting clothing, faces covered. They were moving directly toward Leora. Rian didn't think. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of the princess. His voice was low. "Stay close." Before Leora could respond, one of the figures lunged from the shadows, something metallic flashing in their hand. Rian moved fast, intercepting the attacker with a sharp push to the chest. The blow sent the masked figure stumbling back into a low hedge. The second figure darted in from the side. Rion twisted, grabbing their arm and forcing it upward. Away from Leora, the attacker's weapon, a small, needle-like device, clattered to the ground. Guests began to shout. Guards rushed forward from the edges of the garden. One of the attackers threw a handful of fine powder toward Rion's face. He turned his head, avoiding most of it, but his eyes burned slightly. The attacker tried to slip past him toward them. Princess Rion's instincts took over. He grabbed the back of the intruder's collar and yanked hard, spinning them to the ground. The other masked figure tried to run, but two palace guards tackled them before they could reach the outer paths. The king's voice rang out, deep and sharp, "Seize them." More guards surrounded the attackers, binding their hands with glowing restraints. The crowd's whispers filled the garden like a sudden storm. Leora stepped forward slightly, her voice steady. "I am unharmed." Rion glanced at her, checking quickly for any sign of injury. She gave a small nod, signaling she was fine. The queen's gaze moved from her daughter to Rion. "You reacted before anyone else?" "I saw them coming," Rion replied simply. The guards dragged the masked figures away. Rion noticed that neither of them spoke a word. They kept their heads down, their movements sharp but controlled, like trained professionals. As the ceremony ended earlier than planned, Leora walked with Rion toward the royal wing. The path was quieter now, only the sound of their footsteps and the faint hum of the lanterns. "You acted quickly," she said. "I just did my job." She gave him a small look. "Not everyone would have seen them in time. Even some of my guards missed the first movement." Rion thought of the thin fabric he had found earlier in the week. "I think this was connected to the shadow I saw in the corridor." Leora's expression tightened. "Then they have been inside the palace before." Back in the royal chambers, Elder Marin was already waiting. He bowed to the princess, his voice low. "Your Highness." The attackers carried no identification. They refused to speak, but they were skilled, not common criminals. Skilled enough to move through the gardens without being noticed. Rion added. Marin nodded. "Yes." "Which means they knew the patrol patterns. That means someone inside the palace helped them," Leora said. Her tone was calm, but Rion caught the steel beneath it. Marin looked to Rion. "From now on, you will remain within arm's reach of the princess whenever she is outside her private quarters." "That was already my plan," Rion said, later. When they were alone, Leora stood by the balcony, looking out at the glowing city. "You understand, Rion, tonight was only the beginning. Whoever sent them will not stop because they failed once." "I know," he replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes met his, and for a moment she studied him as though measuring something unseen. Then she gave a small nod. "Good. Because I suspect the real reason I chose you is about to be tested." Rion didn't ask what she meant. He just tightened the strap on his wristband, the one that marked him as her protector, and looked out over the city with her. Somewhere out there, someone had tried to reach her tonight, and Rion knew they would try again. Next time, he would be ready even sooner. The attack in the gardens had changed everything. The palace felt less like a safe place and more like a cage with too many shadows. Guards were doubled at every entrance. The council met in private sessions almost daily, and yet, despite all the extra protection, Princess Leora made a decision that surprised everyone. "We are leaving for the border," she announced at a morning council meeting. The king frowned. "The border is unstable. This is no time for you to be there." "It is exactly the time," Leora replied calmly. "If I wait, the rebels will believe the royal family ignores them. They need to hear from me directly." Some council members argued against her, but Rion could see she wasn't going to change her mind. When she looked toward him, her expression was firm. "My protector will accompany me." Rion said nothing. His place was at her side, no matter where that side happened to be. 2 days later, they departed. The journey was nothing like Rion had imagined. The transport was not a ship in the human sense, but a massive living creature. Its body shaped like a sleek vessel, gliding through the air with a deep, steady hum. The Varel called it a skyrunner. Inside, Its walls pulsed faintly with life, and its seats were soft, adjusting to whoever sat on them. Rian sat across from Leora in the main cabin. The wide windows showed rolling plains below, dotted with rivers that shimmered in the sunlight. "You've been to the border before?" Rian asked. "Once," she said. "It is not like the capital. Fewer rules, more danger, but also more truth. People speak their minds there." Rian could already feel the difference as they neared their destination. The air seemed heavier, the skies darker. Shapes moved on the ground far below. Some were settlements, others groups of travelers, but some looked like armed patrols. They arrived at a fortified outpost built of dark stone and glowing crystal. Soldiers greeted Leora with deep bows, though Rian noticed many of them gave him questioning looks. The commander of the outpost, a tall Varel named Jareth, welcomed them with a formal salute. "Your Highness, we are honored, but I must warn you, there has been talk of unrest in the nearby settlements. Rebels seek to push into the lowlands. That is why I am here," Leora replied. Jareth's gaze shifted to Rian. "And this is your human protector." "He is," Leora said without hesitation. "And he has already proven his worth." Jareth gave a polite nod, though Rian could tell he wasn't convinced. That evening, a meeting was held with leaders from the nearby settlements. They gathered in the outpost council chamber, a round room with a wide table of polished black stone. The leaders were a mix of armored soldiers and robed elders. Some greeted Leora with respect, others with caution. One in particular, a broad-shouldered man named Varric, spoke openly. "Your Highness," Varric said, "we cannot trust the capital's promises. Too many times we've been told aid would come, and it never did." Leora's voice was calm. "I am not here with promises. I am here to listen and to act." Varric's gaze slid to Rian. "And what role does this human play in your listening?" Rian kept his voice level. "I make sure words can be spoken without fear of blades or poison. That's all." A faint smile touched Leora's lips, but Varric's eyes narrowed slightly after the meeting. Rian walked with Leora along the outer wall of the outpost. The night was quiet, except for the sound of wind moving across the plains. "Not everyone here wants peace," Rian said. "I know," Leora replied. "Some benefit from conflict, but others are simply tired of being ignored." Rian glanced toward the dark horizon. "If there's trouble, it won't wait for a council vote." She stopped walking and looked at him. "That is why I brought you." The next morning, trouble found them. A scout rushed into the outpost with urgent news. A nearby village had been attacked during the night. Smoke still rose from its outer buildings. No one knew if the attackers were rebels or simply raiders. Taking advantage of the unrest, Leora insisted on going there immediately, despite the commander's warning. "If I wait, more will suffer," she said. Rian didn't argue. The Skyrunner carried them over the plains in less than an hour. From above, Rian could see the damage, blackened rooftops, scattered debris, and groups of villagers gathered in the open. When they landed, the villagers stared in surprise at the sight of the princess stepping from the vessel. Rian stayed close, scanning every face. Some were relieved, others guarded. And a few clearly angry-eyed an elder woman stepped forward. "Your Highness, you honor us, but this is dangerous for you. The ones who did this may still be near." "Then it is dangerous for all of you," Leora replied, "and that is why I came." As they spoke, Rian's attention caught on movement near the edge of the village. A small group slipping between the remains of burned houses. They were dark clothing, moving too quietly to be ordinary villagers. "Leora," he said quietly, "we have company." She followed his gaze, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Rebels? Or the same people who sent the ones to the palace?" Rian said, before the words were fully out. The figures began to scatter, vanishing into the open plains. Rian didn't think. He was already moving, sprinting after the closest one. The ground was uneven, slowing him, but he managed to close the distance. He grabbed the runner's cloak, pulling them down. The figure twisted, trying to break free, but Rian held on. "Why are you here?" he demanded. The masked figure said nothing, but their eyes flashed with recognition. They knew exactly who he was. With a sudden movement, They slipped a small metal disc into his hand and shoved away, vanishing into the tall grass before he could catch them again. Back at the village, Rion handed the disc to Leora. It was smooth, marked with a single symbol. The same symbol he had seen carved into one of the palace's older corridors. "This means they've been inside the palace and the borderlands," Rion said. "They're moving everywhere." Leora turned the disc over in her hand. "Then, whoever is behind this has more reach than I thought." Rion looked out toward the dark plains, the wind tugging at his coat, and they're not finished yet. The walls, each showing symbols Rion could not understand. Alien leaders sat on tall seats carved from crystal, their robes swaying as they moved. They were not as tall as the palace guards, but their eyes were sharp, and their voices carried power. Leora stood at the center of the room, her posture straight and confident. Rion stood just behind her, scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. The talks had been tense since they began. The border leaders were suspicious of the royal family. They feared the palace would take their land and ignore their traditions. One leader, a broad-shouldered alien with pale blue skin, leaned forward. "If you want peace," he said in a firm voice, "you must first give up the human." The room went silent. Rion's jaw tightened. He understood enough of their language now to know exactly what had been said. Leora's eyes flicked to him for a moment, then back to the leader. "Why?" she asked, her voice calm. The leader pointed at Rion. "He is not one of us. He knows nothing of our ways. How can we trust him to stand beside you when he may not respect our customs?" Another leader nodded in agreement. "If your human leaves, perhaps we will believe your intentions are true." Rion felt heat rise in his chest. He wanted to stay quiet. This was Leora's discussion, but the words burned inside him. Leora opened her mouth to speak, but Rion stepped forward before she could. "I will not leave her side," he said clearly. His voice echoed in the hall. Some of the aliens frowned at his interruption, but he continued, keeping his tone respectful. "I am not here to replace your ways or disrespect your people. I am here because she trusts me. If you wish for peace, it should not depend on removing someone who is loyal to the one asking for it." The leader with blue skin narrowed his eyes. "You speak boldly for someone in a place not his own." Rion met his gaze without fear. "Maybe, but I speak because I believe this peace matters. And if I must stand here as a reminder that humans can keep their word, then that is what I will do." The room grew quiet again. Whispers moved through the leaders. Finally, one of the elder leaders, an alien with silver lines across their face, spoke. "He is not like others we have met. His words are steady." The talks began again, this time with less sharpness in the leaders' voices. It seemed his stance had shifted something, even if only a little. But before they could settle anything, the sound of metal hitting stone echoed from outside the hall. Rion turned sharply. He knew that sound, the scrape of weapons being drawn. The doors burst open. The masked attackers had returned. They moved fast, their weapons glowing faintly, rushing toward the leaders with deadly intent. The guards reacted late, caught off guard by the sudden assault. Rion's body moved before his mind caught up. "Down," he shouted, pushing Leora behind one of the crystal seats. An attacker swung a blade toward him, but Rion sidestepped, grabbing a spear from a nearby guard. He struck with quick, sharp moves, forcing the attacker back. Leora was not still. She had drawn her own slim blade, the one she carried for formal appearances but clearly knew how to use. She blocked a strike aimed at one of the leaders and countered with precise skill. "Stay close," Rion called, moving to cover her side. The attackers fought fiercely, but Rion's training and human speed allowed him to keep up. He used the environment, the tall seats, the banners, the crystal pillars, to block and redirect attacks. One masked fighter lunged for the elder leader. Rion threw the spear, striking the attacker in the leg and sending them to the ground. 2 guards finally managed to shut the hall doors, trapping the remaining attackers inside. The fight grew desperate, but with Leora and Rion working in sync, the tide turned. When the last attacker was disarmed, silence returned to the hall. The leaders were shaken but unharmed. The blue-skinned leader looked at Rion, his earlier doubt replaced by something closer to respect. You saved more than the princess today. You saved all of us." The elder leader stepped forward. "Perhaps it is not weakness for a ruler to choose one from another world. Perhaps it is wisdom." Leora gave a small smile toward Rian. "I chose him because he would never abandon me. Today, you saw why." The leaders agreed to continue peace talks, not out of fear, but out of gratitude and new trust. As they left the hall, Rian felt the weight of the day pressing on him. His body ached from the fight, but his mind was clear. For the first time since being chosen, he felt certain that he belonged at Leora's side. The sun rose over the border settlement, painting the plains in shades of gold and silver. After the attack in the hall, the outpost was quiet, almost peaceful, for the first time in days. Rian allowed himself a moment to breathe. Princess Leora walked beside him along the outer walls, her silver cloak glinting in the morning light. The village leaders had already begun repairing the damage from the previous night. Smoke from burned buildings had cleared, and villagers moved with purpose. Grateful that no lives had been lost. "You did well yesterday," Leora said quietly. Rian glanced at her. "We both did. But thank you." She smiled faintly. "It is not only your skill in battle that matters. You have courage and judgment. That is why I chose you." Rian felt warmth rise in his chest. He had never expected to hear such words directly from a princess, let alone one from an alien empire. They spent the morning speaking with the villagers, listening to their needs and helping plan for rebuilding. Leora was calm, authoritative, and compassionate. Rian stayed by her side, answering questions, translating where needed, and silently watching for any hint of danger. For hours, they moved from house to house, tent to tent, talking to people who had been scared but were now beginning to hope. "You could lead your own people," one elder said to Rian quietly. "Humans have courage, but you act with care too." Rian shook his head. "My place is with her. I protect her, and I learn from her." The elder studied him, then nodded. "Then you were wise." As the day went on, Rian noticed Leora often watching him when she thought no one else was looking. There was a quiet trust in her gaze, and he realized that trust had grown stronger than any bond he had ever known. When the repairs were nearly complete, she led him to a small hill overlooking the village. The twin moons were just beginning to rise, casting soft silver light over the plains. "You were right yesterday," Leora said. "The one I chose would be tested, but you stood firm." Rian shook his head. "It wasn't just me. You faced them too." Her eyes softened. "Perhaps. But I needed someone I could rely on, someone who would not waver." He looked out over the village, feeling the quiet strength of the people below, the glow of the moons above, and the presence of the princess beside him. He realized that this moment, calm, safe, yet full of potential, was rare. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. "And I won't let anything happen to this place," she replied. As evening fell, they returned to the outpost. The council of leaders gathered once more to formalize the new agreements for peace and trade. This time, the discussions were smoother. The leaders spoke respectfully, often looking at Rian and Leora as a team, a pair that commanded attention and trust. After the council concluded, Leora walked with him toward the skyrunner that would take them back to the capital. The stars were bright in the sky, the plains below quiet except for the soft hum of the wind. "You've changed everything here," Rian said. "And you helped," she replied. Rian smiled faintly. "It feels strange, knowing I belong in a place I never imagined being." "You belong with me," Leora said simply. "That is what matters." Rian looked at her, and for the first time, he did not feel like a visitor, a soldier, or an outsider. He felt like a protector, yes, but also something more, a partner in every sense. The journey back to the capital was smooth. The palace seemed brighter to Rian this time, not because of the glowing walls or the crystal floors, but because he now understood his place. He was no longer just a human soldier standing behind a princess. He was her protector, her confidant, and someone who had earned her trust. When they arrived, the king and queen awaited them. Their expressions were calm but proud. "You returned safely," the king said. "And with the people's trust," Leora added, turning to her parents, thanks to him. The queen looked at Rian, her eyes gentle but firm. You have proven yourself not only to the princess but to our empire. That is no small achievement for one who comes from another world. Rian bowed slightly. I only did what was necessary. You did more, Leora said, stepping forward. You showed them that humans can stand beside Virel, not as servants, not as subjects, but as equals. Days passed. The palace slowly returned to normal. Though whispers of Rian's deeds spread through the halls, some nobles were still cautious. But most had begun to see him in a new light. Even those who had doubted his abilities now treated him with respect. Rian and Leora continued training together, discussing strategies, and walking the gardens. Each day, their bond grew stronger. She shared more of her thoughts, and he shared his experiences from the human colonies. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the tall spires of the palace, Leora stopped near the crystal fountain in the central courtyard. Rian, she said softly, I want you to know, choosing you was not only my decision for protection. I chose you because I see who you are. Your courage, your honesty, your determination. I trust you with everything. Rian felt a swell of emotion he could not put into words. He bowed his head slightly, and I trust you with mine. Always. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the palace quiet around them, the fountain sparkling in the evening light. That night, Rian sat in his quarters, looking at the glowing band on his wrist, the mark of his role as chosen protector. It had been months since he was first chosen, yet it still felt like yesterday. He realized something important. He had been tested, and he had survived, not only because of his training, but because he had someone beside him he could trust completely. Leora had chosen him, not because he was perfect, but because he was brave enough to stand firm, honest enough to speak, and human enough to think differently from anyone else in the empire. And in that choice, Rian found not only purpose, but belonging. The next morning, as the first light of the sun broke over the palace spires, Leora appeared at his door. She smiled, and he knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. Ready for the council meeting? She asked. Rian nodded, tightening the straps of his armor. Always. She extended her hand. He took it, feeling a quiet certainty pass between them. Whatever the future held, threats, rebellions, or challenges, they would face it as a team. For the first time, Rian felt completely at home in a world that had once seemed so alien. And as they walked together toward the council chamber, side by side, he understood something he would never forget. Being chosen was not just about protection. It was about trust, courage, and the bond that could unite two worlds. The princess had seen him and said, I want him. And now, after every trial, every battle, every choice, he belonged, not only as her protector, but as someone she could rely on completely. And for Rian, that was enough.